All right, hey, welcome everybody. It's at Antioch 30 Live. We are so glad you joined us with us tonight. Here with me is Steve Crawley, and this is kind of a little bit different tonight. If you've been tuning in with us, most of the time we're in the sanctuary at this time. Well, we are going live right now, and actually over in the sanctuary right now is, they're doing some choir practice. So Travis is hogging the worship center tonight. But no, so we are in my office, so you're getting a chance to get a first-hand look of kind of my office. We're gonna keep the camera here because over there it's not near as clean. So, but we are so glad you joined with us. Man, it's been a great series, and I've heard some great feedback. And we've got some questions tonight that are really pertinent, and we're going to get to those in just a few minutes. And so we're so glad you tuned in. Hey, I want to make you aware of this. Several of you had hollered at me and said, "Hey, I couldn't get the paperwork to download." And so today, if you came into when you came into the sanctuary today, or excuse me, in the atrium, you saw that we had hard copies of this. All right. If you didn't get a hard copy and you would like one, they'll be there this coming Wednesday night. They'll be there next Sunday morning. But let me also say this. If you would like me to email this to you, all you have to do is email me at Shawn, SHAWN, at AntiochConway.com. This is so useful. You'll have to fill in the blanks, but you'll also see the answers to those. And so this is good. So if you didn't get one of these, man, great job putting this together, by the way. If you didn't get one of these, hey, holler at us and we'll make sure you get one. You'll need one in your hand. So, hey, Steve, thank you so much.
Yeah, great to be with you, man.
Man, talking about something that is so pertinent, so pertinent. And, we're going to go right into some of the questions. And I wanted to say this. Both for review, and for those of us who've seen this, and then for those who may have missed the lessons, you brought out a really neat statistic talking about how rich we really are in America. Could you tell us again what those stats are about our wealth in the United States?
Yeah, a number of years ago I came across a website called globalrichlist.com, and I don't think that website is still in existence today, but there's another Kutoa.org, Kutoa, I think it was .org, and it has these statistics. But yeah, if someone makes $45,000 a year, that puts in the top 2% of the wealthiest people in the world. Wow. Family income of $45,000, $80,000 per year puts you in the top 1%. It's like 0.7% of the wealthiest people in all the world, which is quite amazing when you think about it. I mean, I think here in America we lose sight of reality of just how wealthy that we are. But one of the things that kind of put that in perspective for me, Shawn, several years ago, I was traveling in the Philippines, and we went up into the mountain region there in the Philippines. So this was way out in a very remote area. A young man was hired to help take us on this expedition. We were in these old Jeeps, and it was rugged terrain. And this young man was hired just to kind of be our on-site mechanic, 15 years old. And we needed him that day, by the way, because we lost a drive shaft. We got up under there, wired it back up somehow, got it going. So anyway, this young man was with us. Well, I happened to be wearing an Under Armour baseball cap. Well, when he saw that Under Armour, I guess he had seen it on TV or maybe in a magazine or something. You just couldn't believe that I had an Under Armour hat.
Big time.
Well, at the end of the day, I said, "Hey, man," I said, "would you like this hat?" Well, I couldn't have given him a sports car and him been any more happy than he was. And it was just a reminder to me of things that a hat that we just take for granted. We've got a closet full of them, yet in other places of the world, it's not the way it is here. And so those statistics on that site that we shared are just a sobering reminder of just how wealthy that we really are in America.
Man, truly blessed.
Yeah.
Man, we're so blessed. So why when we talked about putting this thing together for Antioch 30 Live, why finances? Why, for Christians, and certainly why for Americans, why Christians? Why is it important for us to study finances?
Well, as mentioned, I think it's important for any Christ follower to study stewardship, because the Bible has so much to say about it. Jesus had so much to say about it. But then going back to what we just mentioned, that is, I think in America, we tend to lose sight of reality when it comes to just how blessed that we really are. I read a story of a missionary. It wasn't one of our BMA missionaries, but it was a missionary by the name of Rick Malm, who had gone to Central America to language school. And he had a Guatemalan language teacher. This was right after the 2008 Great Recession here. And he said, I thought I would play with her a little bit. He said, she asked, how are things in America? And he said, we're in some very difficult times in America. He said, as a matter of fact, it is so bad in America right now that the poor people are having to live in their cars. He said her response is pretty much what I would have thought. He said, her incredulous response was not being surprised that there were poor people in America, but she said, poor people in America have cars?
Wow.
And she went on to say, she was a college graduate, held a good job, but never in her wildest imagination did she ever hope to own a car. Wow. So that really kind of puts it in perspective in our nation, the way that we tend to compare ourselves to each other. But we're really only about 5% of the world's population. And not everybody lives the way that we live and is as blessed as we are. And so I think it's really incumbent upon us as Christ followers in America to be students of stewardship so that we understand we are blessed to be a blessing and how to manage the resources God has entrusted to us wisely.
Wow. Students of stewardship, man, we need to study it. We need to know it. And in loving this, what Steve did is he had two different views. Okay, in the first lessons, you talked about the macro, the overarching views, and then in the second session, he really got really down to the nitty gritty and the micro. And then what you said in the macro, really, this is a question that I came up with. He mentioned in the macro part of the lessons, you said there's four things we need with our money. We need to be generous, and I think we all, we even heard a sermon about that this morning. We need to be generous. We need to be careful, okay? We need to be careful, and we know we got to be careful of finances, and we need to be content. So those three, Steve, I kind of went, yeah, we need to be careful, we need to be content, we need to be generous. But there was one that you said we need to be humble, and man, that's not something really that a lot of us, would think. So why humility when it comes to our finances and those things?
Yeah, that's a great question. If you go back to the text that we used for those lessons, it came out of 1 Timothy chapter 6, verse 17. Paul is writing to Timothy to instruct the believers there, where he was ministering. And he said, Timothy, charge those who are rich in this present world not to be high-minded.
Wow.
Okay, so first he says, encourage them, exhort them, instruct them who are rich. So again, I think that would apply to us today in America. And the first thing that he says in that passage is he said, charge them not to be high-minded. Well, we don't use that word today, but essentially what he's saying is you charge them not to be arrogant. And so what's the antithesis of arrogancy? Being arrogant, it would be to be humble. So we go back to the passage, and that's the first thing that Paul told Timothy to instruct rich people to be careful about is don't be haughty, don't be high-minded, be humble. And when you think about that, I remember a quote by Andy Stanley where he said, if we're not careful, when our net worth is inflated, our self-worth becomes inflated. And so he cautions us in this passage, don't let that happen. Because I know, and maybe you can speak from experience here too, Sean, but not that we would be considered wealthy by a lot of Americans, but sometimes when we do feel like we're doing well financially, it's easy for our hope to begin to migrate from the Lord to our wealth. And so from the provider to the provisions. That's the reason we really want to emphasize that as stewards or students of stewardship, what we're looking for is not letting that hope migrate. That's what he said. Don't become arrogant. Don't become high-minded. Don't let that hope migrate from the provider to the provisions. And so he cautions us about that. So being humble is recognizing that God is the one who gives everything. He's the one who gives us these provisions for our lives.
Makes great sense. Makes great sense. Hey, so what we're going to do is right now, real quick, before we go into your questions in those last few moments, great questions. Get ready. We're going to ask what are target date funds. We're going to ask things like, can you explain dollar cost averaging? What's that mean? And so, even my camera person back there going, What? So we're going to ask them those questions, but before we do this, real quick, what I wanted Steve to do is he talked about that. You talked that there's, you know, our typical, you know, pipeline for finances. What we do in America, the typical pipeline, in other words, what it usually looks like, as composed to what a biblical wisdom, a biblically wise pipeline looks like financially. Man, can you reiterate that?
Yeah, it's kind of a strange term, pipeline, that was used there. But what we're talking about really is our priorities. And what we covered in that second session when we were really looking at the practical components of stewardship was that there are really only 4 uses of money. Only 4 things you can do with money. And those are live, give, owe, and grow. Those are the only things you can do with it, with money. So when it comes to the way most people prioritize their use of money, it's typically they prioritize the live component. Then it's the owe because of the way that they live. And then, you know we need to save some money, so grow is typically third. And then last, what's at the bottom of that vortex, if you will, is the give use of money. We want to give, it's just not much left down here to give because of the way we prioritize. So with the typical money priority pipeline, what we see is that most people prioritize their lifestyle. Okay, what type of house do I want? What type of car do I want to drive? What material things do I want? That's priority. And so because it's priority, then the O component is often next because of that lifestyle. You know, the mortgages, the consumer debt, all the payments that go with that. And then, okay, I know that we need to be saving some money, but there's just not a whole lot left here because of the type house we live in or the type car that we drive. So they put a little bit of money back, but then at the bottom is that giving component. And man, that's the reason that statistics show sadly, most Christians only give about 2 to 3% of their income, which is astounding when we're Christ followers. And so what does the Bible have to say about that? Well, rather than prioritizing our money by live, owe, grow, and give, the Bible says turn that upside down. Turn that on its head. Prioritize your giving, then your growing, then the owing, and then lifestyle is now at the bottom of the vortex, not your giving. So go ahead and make that priority. Give, establish what that amount should be, make that your first fruits. And then the grow component, okay? How much should you be putting back? Make that priority. And then whatever's left is what we establish as our lifestyle. So just a quick example of what we're talking about there to apply that to life, just from a personal standpoint. Last year, we needed to trade in the old Yukon that we had. You know, we have 4 children, we had a family of 6. Well, now we're down to 3. We didn't need this big Yukon.
Right.
And so we're trying to determine what type of car do we want. So we ended up buying a Honda CR-V. Well, that's a nice car. It's a dependable car, but you know, it's not anything that we'll consider top of the line. Well, why do we buy a Honda CR-V? Could have bought maybe a nicer vehicle, but when we looked at our giving goals and our growing goals, that was the vehicle that just fit there in that part of the vortex that would allow us to accomplish these other goals. And so what I use that simply to say, this priority pipeline serves as a great filter for making good decisions that are Christ honoring and still allow us to take care of our family in the future.
Man, the thing I love about Steve too is you even said that you plan, and when you stick to the plan, that's how you get there. By the way, it's a great thing. It's on pages 3 and 4 if you have your handouts. And I know it's kind of hokey, but you can't see on the Zoom. There's kind of what the vortex looks like. Okay, I don't know how well you can see that. That's give, grow, owe, and live. Man, great stuff. And you'll see that again. You'll see that in the packet. So well done. All right, we're getting to some of your questions. Here they are in these last moments that we have. What should I do if I'm in a situation where I can't begin by giving 10%? We hear that's the thing. What should I do if I'm in a situation where I feel like I can't begin that 10%?
Yeah. Well, I would say we maybe go back to what we just looked at, and the first thing we want to do there is to make sure that we are following that biblical pattern of stewardship, that biblical stewardship pipeline, where we've got our priorities in order: the give, grow, owe, and live. But that's not going to happen overnight. We certainly understand that. So I would say you begin by assessing your spending plan. You know, divide your necessities and your wants, and make sure that you're objective in looking at that. And there are probably a lot of wants that are in our budget that if we were honest with ourselves, we could do without, so that we still cover our needs, but that we can prioritize our giving as the Bible teaches us, as well as our growing. So again, it's not something that would happen overnight, but I think that's the place to begin, is take a good, strong look at your budget, assess your needs versus your wants, make sure that those priorities are in line. And then I would say, while you're transitioning, because chances are you may not be able to begin immediately, think about tithing your time. Not to say that should ever be a substitute for giving our money back to God, but while you're transitioning, that is one way we can show the Lord that, hey, we're stepping out in faith, and we're serious about making you top priority in our lives.
That's a great point. I love that. I love that. You know, so giving her your time, having that plan. You gotta get to the point. We have to get to the point, Steve, and you kind of mentioned this, of where we write stuff down.
Yeah. We've
We've got to be disciplined enough to eventually begin to write things down. You know, we can have a plan all day, but until we write it down, that's so huge. If I'm not saving, here's another good question. If I'm not saving 10%, what's the very least I should give or to put back to make sure I'm going to be okay for retirement?
Okay, that's a good question. It's a difficult question to answer, however, but let's talk about some principles there with regard to that, because it's going to be different for everybody based upon whatever their needs may be. But I think it really begins by assessing just where we are and beginning with the end in mind. In other words, when I get to retirement, what will my needs be then? And I think that's where the planning really comes into play, assessing what will our needs be in retirement, and to the best of our ability, putting together a spending plan for those retirement years. And then when we understand what our needs will be, then we can understand what the income to supply those needs, basically what our target should be. Okay. So assess what your needs are, to the best of your ability, put together a budget of what you feel like your retirement needs will be, and then determine what is your guaranteed income, maybe in the form of pensions, though not too many people have pensions anymore, but also Social Security. What is your forecasted Social Security for yourself, for your spouse, and then determine, based upon any other sources of income, how much of my needs, those projected needs, are not being met by guaranteed income. So let's say, for example, that your needs come to $25,000 per year, and your income is only $20,000 per year. Well, that means there's a $5,000 gap between what you project in income and what you project in your expenses. So you're going to have to somehow supply that $5,000. Well, that gives you a target to shoot at as far as how much you need to save, and that may be different for you versus someone else. That's why it's a question that, you know, is really going to be unique depending on your circumstances, your particular situation. But I think the key there is begin with the end in mind, understand what you're shooting at, what your shortfall is, and then put together a systematic plan that will help you accommodate that gap that you've identified.
That's awesome. Great response. And by the way, for those of you who don't know how to go on Social Security, you'll see that in the packet, how to go on the Social Security website. He even told you some of the questions they'll ask you. And so if you need information for that, hey, get the packet and you'll see about that. Here's a great question. What is the difference between Roth retirement and traditional retirement accounts?
Okay, so what I assume they're referring to there is the Roth IRA versus the traditional IRA. And even some 401k plans now, 403b plans, have a Roth option. The BMA America plan, for example, that you're a part of, we have a Roth option in that now. And that's all relatively new. I believe that legislation was put in place back in 1997 by Senator William Roth of Delaware, hence the name, the Roth IRA. But what the Roth allows, and it's a great tool for retirement, but what it allows is for you to put after-tax dollars in, unlike the traditional, which is pre-tax. However, the earnings on those dollars grow tax-free forever. And so You begin putting that in, and while you don't get the tax benefit when you first contribute, from now on, that will grow tax-free.
That's in the Roth.
That's in the Roth,
Yeah.
that's right.
Okay.
And that's unlimited. There's no required minimum distribution at any certain age. It is a great benefit. The caveat is that you don't get the deduction on the front end. However, it grows tax-free afterwards. So it's a huge advantage, especially for young people to take advantage of. Whereas the traditional IRA, you do get the tax benefit on the front end. It reduces your gross federal tax for federal and state purposes, so you get a tax benefit initially. However, and it does grow tax deferred. However, when you go to take those monies out, then you pay whatever your tax rate would be at that time. Now, why is the Roth even more important today than maybe it was even at the start of this year? Well, the stimulus package that was just put in place was in excess of $3 trillion. There's going to come a point where inevitably, most likely, we're going to see taxes increase. Right. Well, if you've got money in a Roth, then that's not going to affect you. And so there's a lot to think about there. It's a huge advantage. And there are different calculators where you can compare the Roth versus the traditional to see which is best. But just generally speaking, especially if you're young, the Roth is the way to go.
Okay, good, great response. Thank you. Here's a question. What are target date funds?
Target date funds.
Target date funds.
Well, you think of a target. That's something that you're shooting at, of course. And a target date fund is very similar to that. So let's say that that you have someone that's planning to retire in the year 2045. Okay, let's say that they're 40 years old right now. They want to retire at 65. So in 2045, they're planning to retire. Well, there will be a 2045 target date fund. That's your target retirement date. You would invest in a 2045 target date fund. And what that means is that fund is going to allocate your resources into stocks and bonds based upon that projected retirement date, becoming more and more conservative as you get closer to retirement. And this is done automatically for you, which is why for a lot of investors it's a great option. When you're younger, it's going to be an allocation that's heavily weighted in stocks, because stocks will be volatile, but you've got lots of time for that to work. But then as you get closer to that retirement age, that portfolio is going to become more conservative with a higher concentration in fixed income assets such as bonds or cash or those type securities. So the target date fund, again, is a great option if you're sort of wanting a hands-off, look, I don't know anything about the market, I don't want to know anything, because it's all automated and it works for you.
Okay, all right, so that's a great response for that. So that may be something, target date funds, if you're one of those people, hey, let it go and let them have it, that may be a good one for you. Hey, real check, how are we doing on time? We got 7 minutes? Awesome, we got 7 minutes. Well, great, and these final 7 minutes, we'll go quickly, all right? Can you explain what dollar cost averaging means? Can you explain what dollar cost averaging means?
So dollar cost averaging is an investment strategy whereby you determine a set amount that you're going to be able to invest on a regular basis. And then you invest that same amount for a series of months or years, but preferably years, because you want time to work for you for dollar cost averaging to give you the greatest benefit. But let's just say, as an example, that, okay, in my budget, I've determined in my budget, after I prioritize my giving, my growing, let's say that I'm going to put $500 a month back, okay? With dollar cost averaging, you put $500 in at the same time every month. Let's say the 15th of the month, you're just going to have it directly debited from your checking account. And month after month, you're going to invest $500 in a particular mutual fund. Well, the way dollar cost averaging works is you don't worry about where the market is. Because you know the market's going to be up, the market's going to be down, it's going to be all over the map. With dollar cost averaging, you don't worry about that. You just say, this is the amount that I can invest, and I'm going to invest that same amount at the same time every single month. Well, what happens is when the market is up, you put that 500 in, well, obviously you're buying stock and the value of that's here. But when it goes back down, you think, well, I've just lost the money from that I've invested earlier. However, what happens is when the market goes down, you're putting the same amount in, you're buying more shares for the same amount of money. So over time, even though the market is going up and down, by dollar cost averaging, that same amount every single month at virtually the same time, you're able to buy low, and then that ultimately increases, and over time, statistics have shown, history has shown that it's a great strategy, and here's why. What dollar cost averaging does is it takes you out of this hit and miss game of trying to time the market.
Right.
You know, there's an old saying, it's not about timing the market that's critical with sound financial planning and execution. It's about time in the market. So by setting an amount every month, about that same time every month, you just keep buying. You don't have to worry about where the market is. It's about consistency. And I think Dave Ramsey puts it well. I'm not sure if he's got empirical data to back this up, but he says, you know, good financial management is about 20% head knowledge and 80% behavior.
Yeah.
And so dollar cost averaging lets you just invest it, forget about it, and just let it ride its course. And typically speaking, when people have done that, and they've done it for years at a time, year after year after year, they've done very, very well.
So dollar cost averaging sounds like a good plan.
A good plan, absolutely.
A good plan, all right.
That's
Our time real quick. All right, our final 4 minutes, all right? Here, great question. What if I didn't start investing when I was young? What can I do? I didn't start investing when I was young. Now, I don't know what age I am now, but what can I do?
Yeah, so that a lot of folks are in that category. So first of all, don't fret. Of course, we know that we trust in the provider and not in the provisions. However, we know that we're stewards of those assets too. So it is incumbent upon us to take sound action. I would say, Sean, the first thing we want to do there is we want to maximize our retirement accounts if possible. Take advantage of every opportunity you have to put money back. And in an employer-sponsored plan, if you're over the age of 50, you can put $25,500 per year back in addition to what your employer might do. With an IRA, a Roth, or a traditional, if you're over the age of 50, you can actually put $7,000 in for yourself and your spouse, in addition to maxing out your 401k or 403b. So if possible, and I know that's a lot, but if possible, you've got ground to make up, so you've got to get serious about it.
Yeah.
Max out those retirement accounts. Then I would say, max out your working years. Instead of retiring early, go ahead and work as long as you possibly can. Retirement, from our Western mindset, is not really a biblical concept. You don't see retirement in the Bible except with the tribe of Levi, and that really had nothing to do with the age of 62, 65, or 70. So work as long as you can, as long as you have health. And then I would say max out your Social Security, and that maybe will lead into another question, but instead of taking the Social Security at 62 or maybe even at full retirement age, maybe defer that to the age of 70 so that you can get the biggest bang for the buck there.
Awesome. Which leads us to our final question. It's a great question. This person says, we've been told that we couldn't get full benefits until 66 and a half. However, I've had some people tell me waiting doesn't really give you a whole lot more money since life expectancy is between 75 and 80. My question is it really beneficial to wait? And if we go ahead and draw early, are we not allowed to work?
Okay, so let's take the first part of that question first with regard to should I take it early or should I not? And it's not a one size fits all. Okay, so it will be nuanced based upon an individual's circumstance. But I think we could say, generally speaking, I think it's good to consider waiting if possible. In that, if you wait to full retirement age, typically your compensation is going to be about 25% more than it would be if you took it early. Okay. If you can wait until the age of 70, it goes up 8% per year until you reach 70. So you're talking about a significant difference between 62 and 70 that will be paid out for life. And Social Security is an annuity, and it's an inflation-adjusted annuity, which is a huge benefit to you. Something else to consider there is if, let's say that your spouse didn't work, she qualifies for spousal benefits, which would be 1/2 of your Social Security. If you wait until 70, even if you die, she gets that inflated rate for the rest of her life. So there's a lot to consider there. Now, with regard to the second part of the question, can I work and still receive Social Security? If you take Social Security before full retirement age, there is a cap. I think it's somewhere in the neighborhood of $18,400 now. Anything that you make over that, they'll take $1 of every $2 that you earn as basically a Social Security tax, if you will. And you don't lose that necessarily, but the way Social Security is calculated is based upon your top 35 highest earning years. So if you do take it at 62, there will be some ramifications in how much you can earn before it's discounted, if you will, based upon the current tax laws.
Awesome. Hey, thank you. I know we've gone just a minute or two over our time, but man, listen, awesome. But Steve is one of our teachers, and he's amazing. And man, thank you so much.
Yeah, glad to be with you.
One of the things I want to finish off with this, he had some daily affirmations in your handout. You'll see this, some daily affirmations to tell God every day and to tell yourself every day to remind of who owns your money. Listen to these affirmations. God, I acknowledge you own the world and everything in it. I trust you, my provider, and not the provisions, as you mentioned a minute ago. I'm content with what you have given me. I will maintain an attitude of gratitude for your provisions. I will manage your resources your way for your glory, as is instructed in your word. I view money and the things of this world through the lens of eternity. Man, that's some great affirmations. Hey, thank you again, Steve. We appreciate it so much. Hey, I want to let you know we start next week with our new series. Jeff Swart will be talking about coronavirus and the signs of the times. So hope you can join us next week. Again, thank you so much, and hope you have a blessed week.